Welcome back to the Innovator, the Imitator, and the Idiot. I am Kyle Wong with Moxie, Colorado.
And I'm Corey Martin with Bank of England Mortgage here in Denver, Colorado.
So today we are going to be talking about 2022 in review. Happy New
Whew.
Year's to everybody. Happy New Year's to you, Corey.
Happy New Year's to you, my brother.
Yeah. New year,
Yeah,
new me, right, baby?
that's right. New year, new me. I shaved. I also found a couple new gray hairs.
Mm,
So, aging gracefully into, that salt and pepper look.
mm. I can see it actually. That's not a bad look.
Yeah, man. So here's the thing is I am very much looking forward to being like that old black man that is like so good at barbecuing and so good at like smoking and like boiling seafood and always smells like drugstore cologne. Like that's me, man. Like
As
I'm
long as you
looking
got good
forward.
cooking, man, I'm there for it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, with the Stacey Adams, you know exactly what
Mm.
sandals I'm talking about, man. That is like I am looking very, very very forward to that time in my life.
Oh
So
man,
yeah,
I
that's
can
it.
smell the backyard from here. Oh man. All right.
That's right.
Well,
Whole
with that in
neighborhood
mind,
smelling like brisket.
2023, 2023, here we are. I still think I remember when it turned to 2022 and I was like, that sounds like a number out of the future. That just doesn't even sound real to me. But yeah, we're going to be talking about 2022, the real estate market, what happened there, what changed. Um, yeah, just laying the framework. We're going to talk about rates. Corey's going to go delve into that. Talk about inventory and pricing. What that looked like and what changed exactly. And then the shift, right? Everybody talks about how it kind of hit a wall and like why that was such a big deal. What does that mean, right? Like what does that objectively mean? Hitting that wall or hitting that shift. And then what does that look like for us now, right? Because going into 2022, it was a very different market. You know that. But 2023, how is that different? So, start us off. I mean, talking about rates, like what the heck changed exactly when it came to numbers?
Yeah, I think the 2022 was the story of trying to respond to COVID, right? We had a worldwide pandemic that just radically changed our market, right? The amount of people that were going out into the market at the beginning of the pandemic um, obviously dropped off. And then as we went through the market or as we went through the pandemic, tons of people decided to take advantage of the lower interest rates. Um, so throughout 2020 and 2021, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates below 3%, right? First time really in history that we could actually see that, interest rates were below 3%. And like I said, the reason they did that was because, look, we're in a pandemic. Most people weren't spending money
Yeah,
at the beginning of 2020 and throughout 2022 or 2021. Most people weren't spending money. And so what they wanted to do was say, hey, look, and money is cheap right now. It's cheaper to borrow money. That's what your interest rate is. And so we had, like I said, throughout 2020 and 2021, we had these really low interest rates that were below 3%.
yeah,
Then
got to heat that
2022,
economy back up.
exactly, right. We had to really, we were just trying to keep it lukewarm, right? We were kind of propping it up in a way because
Thought we did.
what ended up happening was that we through as 2022 came around, we saw inflation go through the roof. I'm sure that over the course of 2022, if you've checked your social media, somebody was complaining about the price of eggs or the price of milk,
Or
or even
gas.
gas. Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. It was gas, right? I think at times throughout in the early 2022 into Q2 of 2022, we were seeing it at $4, over $4 a gallon, right?
And
And
I drive
so
diesel, so it was way worse for me.
oh man, let's make sure that we like say a prayer for Kyle's pocketbooks, right? Because my man was hurting trying to drive that diesel around. He looked good in it, but he was hurting, right? And so that's what we had though, right? Was that inflation because we'd seen so much money being spent in the market throughout 2020 and 2021. What we saw was inflation go through the roof. We also had the wonderful stimulus checks. We had the PPP loans. Hopefully you were on the right side of those, not the fraudulent side of the PPP
Mm,
loans, right? And so that was a lot of a lot of money that was put into the market that, as a result, increased the price of goods. Um, so the Federal Reserve said, what is their job? To manage the economy. They said, we got to get this under control. We have to get inflation under control. And so at the beginning of 2022, you started to see interest rates kind of creep up,
yeah.
3%, gets all the way up from 3.25 up to 3.75 in Q1. And then in Q2, it jumps up to 4. Right. So
Yeah, the brakes got put
immediately,
on.
immediately in April, the Federal Reserve, comes out and they say, look, we've got to respond to inflation. It's getting out of control. We're going to raise interest rates as a way to get inflation under control. And so throughout the second quarter of 2022, we saw interest rates go from 4.75 to 5.25. And then in June, we saw them level out at around five even. So that's the Federal Reserve trying to get a hold of things, trying to keep the inflation down. And then throughout Q3, that's the same story, and it goes, it kind of wafers between 5.25 through down to 5, and then 5.75. It's just kind of hanging between 5 and 6 in Q3. And then finally in Q4, the Federal Reserve said, yo, we're gonna take the governor off of this thing, and we saw interest rates get all the way up to 6, almost 7%
Yeah.
in.
That was the crazy part for me was if you got a potential buyer, let's say pre-approved in February or January, first to second quarter, all of a sudden they can afford two completely different numbers. Second to
Right.
third quarter, two completely different numbers. Third to fourth, two completely different numbers. And so every single time you're like, man, we're working on a completely different timetable, because this time last year, 2021, it was more so like, all right, we got to see what we can get under contract just because they're going to be flying off the shelves. Now we got to see what we can get under contract because you can't afford it next week. It's
Literally
crazy.
next week, right? I think even kind of comparing the beginning of Q4 to, you mentioned like, oh yeah, well, Q1 to Q2, those are two different properties. Q2 to Q3, those are two different properties. Q3 to Q4, two different
Yeah, you're
properties.
just
Shoot.
stepping it down.
I mean, even looking at, the beginning of Q4 all the way through the end of Q4, right? We're talking about from 6 to 7. That
Yeah.
is a big jump, right? And that is two completely different houses. Your borrower's income has not changed. Their debt has not changed, but the interest rate that they'll be looking to take out on a loan has changed. And that in turn changes what they're able to afford. And because we've changed what this large group of buyers is able to afford based off the interest rate, we've also changed what inventory is available, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um, you
absolutely.
know, if we have the largest group of our buyers are able to afford a $400,000 house, and then a month later they're actually able to afford a $350,000 house. That changes what the inventory is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, with that in mind, man, days on market went up real quick. I think the month I saw the biggest change was probably March or April, because that's when people, you started seeing the articles and the headlines where buying crash is happening, the bubbles popped, like it's doomsday,
Right.
and you and I both know, all of our listeners at this point know, like, get the facts, right? Like, you should be educated enough to know what's really going on to where these things don't scare you, because it really shouldn't scare you, honestly, if you're being savvy and playing your cards right. And so I think, yeah, probably March or April is when I saw the biggest shift. That's when the brakes really got put on from the consumer, right? Because yes, there were definite changes. I'm not denying that. Like, people that were pre-approved for, let's say, a $450,000 house could all of a sudden not afford, maybe closer to 400, something like that. So the buyers put the brakes on, the consumers really slowed down. So that means the days on market went up, meaning, when houses were listed, they weren't, 2 days under contract, 3 days under contract, done the next day. we started to quickly see 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we got up to 14 days and people were like, whoa, like the bubbles popped, like the crash has come. It's like, no, the consumer just got scared.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
necessarily reflective. It's not, I wouldn't say those numbers at that time were reflective of what was really true in the market, right? Because we
yeah.
saw a market that got so hot, that things were going so fast for such a high price, that as soon as they started to come down to more of a normal area, same thing with interest rates, people were like, whoa, it's scary, it's bad. Comparatively, that's a big shift. But, in the long-term scale of things, it really wasn't. So,
It really, really, truly wasn't. I think part of it, part of what went into the days on market, let me know if I'm wrong here, but was just like the prices not necessarily matching the interest rates, right? And so
yeah,
throughout
yeah.
2020 and 2021, what we saw was that like, interest rates were low. It was super competitive. So, you could price your house at, 25 grand over, what was recommended,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's like you could get away with that and it would still sell. And it was like, you're like, at the closing table, like looking around, like, wait, is someone's gonna find out, right? you
Right.
know? And then what we happened, I remember being at like open houses right around like,
Oh
I
my
think around like
gosh.
March, April,
A
but it was
zoo.
like just dead at these open houses, and it was because the interest rates had gone up but the prices were like still at, we still had, like, first time home buyer, like, first
Yeah.
starter home condos that were listed at 450, you know what I mean?
No,
And
it's
it's
so funny because it went from a freaking zoo and open houses, like you'd have overlapping showings, like three agents at a time, and then all of a sudden nothing because
yeah,
people were just scared. And you're absolutely right because I always said this to put it real simply. Seller expectations were here where buyer expectations fell to here real quick. And
yep,
so I
yep.
say a big part of our business is really just matching expectations to where we can meet in the middle. And really that's the core of negotiation, right? Like that's what happens when
That part.
a buyer and seller engage in a contract. And it's even more true for showings. And it's funny because an offer. A showing is hardly a commitment at all. It's just looking at the house. But getting people in their contract, I should say submitting an offer is really just that. You're extending your interest in a home, and you have so many opportunities to pull out. But I always tell people if they're interested in the house, like we'll vet it, we'll go look at it, let's at least show it. And then, you shouldn't have fear submitting an offer for something because the worst that they can say is no, or,
Yeah,
here are our terms, we'll negotiate, right? And so that's what I was telling people. I'm like, look, this is not 2021. This is not 2020. It is not as cheap to borrow. And that is okay. You know why? Because
yeah,
while everybody's scared at home saying interest rates are too high, you could be looking in homes as a buyer. You have more time to get in. And that's a good thing.
yeah, on contract.
Yeah. So, I mean, people now actually have a moment to breathe and say, like, hey, I want to go home and sleep on this decision, before I fork out $500,000. Whereas people couldn't do that before. What was funny is I think I had mentioned this before, but previously when we would go to houses like for showings for my buyer clients, I would actually have a contract to buy the house with their terms already written for each of those properties just in case. I didn't send them obviously, and I waited for signatures, but I would say, hey, if you want this house, go ahead and let me know. Because as soon as we're done looking at the house, like we got to be on it, right? Because you always want to be
Yeah,
the first
yeah.
offer if you can be, and get that thing done.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny because it was like the practices that we were seeing in 2020 and 2021. We had a lot of us had to completely change how we were doing business in 2022, and I think that 2023 is going to look a little bit more like, with they're saying, more like it did in the past prior to 2022 or prior to 2020. We'll see interest rates look a lot more like they did in 20 or 20 pre 2020. We'll see
Yeah,
prices look a lot more like they did pre COVID. And hopefully, the competitiveness of the market isn't the same. Um,
right.
it's great to be. I love a competitive market, but you got to just know that like some of these folks are purchasing things that they don't necessarily want,
Mm,
or that they are not ready to purchase, or just doesn't necessarily fit their needs, but they're doing it out of out of necessity, out of
Yeah.
the or not even necessarily out of necessity, out of the pressure that the market has put on
Right. And I remember so many times people would come to me during the 2020, 2021, and the early 2022 period and say, oh, you're in real estate. This must be great for you. This is awesome. And I'm like, well, I mean, actually it was because I had a ton of listings. But at the same time, like in my opinion, there's no such thing as a good market or a bad market necessarily, right?
Yes,
Especially when
absolutely.
you represent both sellers and buyers. Because for me, I did end up having a buyer and it was really sad because they were just like, you know what? We've submitted an offer after offer, like we're tired of doing this. And I'm like, oh man, like I feel for you. This is
Yep.
kind of frustrating and it's hard getting beaten out time after time after time, just trying
Yeah.
to buy a house for you and your family, right? Like this
Just
isn't
to
a game
find
for
somewhere to
people.
live.
Yeah, this is their home. Like this is their family. There's a lot that goes into it. And so saying like this is good or this is bad, I don't usually use words like that, right? Like I just give them the facts. Like, hey, we're in a seller's market right now. It's going to be competitive for you as a buyer. We're going to need to pull out every tool that we can right now. And now that it's shifted in 2022, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, all right, it's been sitting on the market for more than 5 days. We can negotiate a little bit. Like we can get a home warranty thrown in there. We can get concessions at closing. You didn't see that 6 months before. And I think the reason why people are so jarred by that is A, kind of like the media, promotes and perpetuates all these crazy extreme thoughts. But at the same time, like it just happened so quickly. Right? Like rates shot up
Yeah.
very quickly. Normally there's kind of a, slow rise and then a slow fall. And it's usually pretty, I wouldn't say it's pretty level, but it's more predictable. That was fast. That was very
Yeah.
fast. So I understand that completely.
Yeah, I think it goes back to your point about being able to match seller and buyer expectations, and that's what negotiation is. I
Right.
think that because the market changed so quickly, it was really, really hard to adjust those expectations and to
Yeah.
get used to the new reality that we are in. Especially because in 2020 it was 2022 was wild because I think we had just gotten new to like our new reality that was COVID, right? And
Yeah.
so I think people were used to or expected interest rates to stay that way, especially the general public. You and I, the professionals recognize that interest rates can't stay that low. You and I recognize that it's okay for these things, these swings in the market to happen. But the general public, they weren't ready for that, man.
Oh,
they
heck
were
no.
not they were not ready for that. And so I think it's okay for them. We saw, man, 2022, we saw just so many different things, so many changes in how people did business. And
Yeah.
so I think in 2023, it's going to go back to a lot more of we call it a thank you and you're welcome, where truly, the borrower feels like they are getting a good deal and so does the seller.
Yeah.
It should be a lot more of those even transactions where everybody feels like they win.
Right. And we like a good mutually beneficial deal. I mean, that should be what happens in every transaction, I'd like to think.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree. Thinking even, yeah, like looking back at 2022, I remember, or looking at 2021, like you mentioned, seller concessions, like that would get you laughed out of, like your offer
Oh,
wouldn't even
absolutely.
be looked at, right? Whereas I would say like halfway through 2022, like I'd say maybe May, June, that was like if you submitted an offer with a seller concession, um, granted the seller would have like kind of huffed and puffed about it, but you could have gotten a deal done. Especially like, if we're looking at, July, August, once we got into like October,
Yeah.
oh my God. It was because, then we saw inventory starting to drop off, or we saw fewer buyers in the market. So homes were really staying on market long, staying out there longer. And yeah, those seller concessions came to be like a huge tool for people in 2022. And
Right.
I think that in 2023, I don't anticipate it being that benefit, a thing that will, is going to change lives in 2023 as much, but I do think it'll still be used and still be around.
Yeah. It's just funny thinking back because I think just about a year ago, maybe a bit a bit over. I was working with a buyer. I remember we submitted an offer. We did all of the things within reason and went 10,000 over, and they were just like, "Yeah, you weren't even really in the ballpark." And we're just like, "Okay, I mean, yeah, that's fair." But right now I'm under contract on a deal representing the buyer where not only did we submit an initial offer under contract, or I'm sorry, under list, under asking
Yeah, under
price
list.
by 10K, but we also got a seller concession at closing. We're working at a home warranty. And if it appraises low, we also have them meeting us, matching that price, as opposed to the buyer bringing that money forward. So I just think that, that's just one deal or two separate deals. But it just goes to show how fast things have changed, right? Because the homes now, they don't have 10 people hopping on. They just simply don't have as many people that can afford the houses at those prices. So either they're going to have to list low or list more realistically, I should say, as opposed to low, or they're going to have to get used to people like submitting these offers with a lot of other terms.
You know, everything you said is absolutely correct. That said, ladies and gentlemen, if you are thinking about purchasing a home and you have like thought about working with anyone other than Kyle Wong, I got to question your decision making skills. Can you run down what this contract, run down everything you did for this contract or for this buyer that you're under contract on right now? You said
Yes.
10K under.
10K under. We worked out a home warranty. We worked out a seller concession at closing. And then there was one more thing. I can't remember. What was it?
The
Oh,
appraisal.
that's right, appraisal. So if the house does not appraise at the value that we're under contract for, the seller will lower the price, as opposed to my buyer bringing the price to match it.
Hot dog. Man.
That's negotiation right there. Let's go.
Man. Hot dog. But seriously though, folks, that's what kind of like I want to speak to or like obviously call out the fact that Kyle did an exceptional job for his client here. Um, that's just going above and beyond and just crushing it and doing your homework, doing your research, and knowing exactly what it takes to or what the other side's pain points are, and that's how you get to be there, get to this space. But also, that's a reflection of the market.
Yeah,
That's a reflection of
absolutely.
so Kyle is the one who can get you this deal, but that's also like that's not available a year ago.
I could
And
not
I
have
don't
done
know
this a
if
year
that's gonna
ago.
yeah, and I don't know this is gonna be available a year from now, right? Like
Right, right.
I don't think that it's gonna be available. I don't think you're gonna be able to achieve your goals this in the same rate a year from now. So yeah, I just wanted to call that out. That was a great contract.
Oh, thank
I
you.
did a great job on that one. Yeah, that's it. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that being said, if you guys are looking for looking into getting into a house or just want to explore your options. I mean, we're the people to call. I always say, talk to your real estate agent, talk to your lender, have them work some numbers. Nothing's set in stone. Like there's no obligation, especially working with us. I like to think we're pretty easy to work with, right? Because our jobs, the way we see it is we're educating and advising you. That's why we do this podcast. We don't get paid for it, by the way. We do this because we want to share what we know with you and we want to help you make educated decisions, not only about your home purchase, but a refinance or personal finance or how can you work with your business around your home and all the things that go into it. And so give Corey a call, set up a call with the link down below. We can get you pre-qualified, we can talk about options, we can do all that. So with that being said, send us
I'm
off.
Corey. Yeah, I'm Corey Martin with Bank of England Mortgage here in Denver, Colorado. If you have any questions about personal finance or about real estate whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can find my information down below or on my Facebook at Corey Martin.
Yeah, awesome. And I am Kyle with Moxie, Colorado. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. If you enjoy, please subscribe, please share, and we'll catch you next week. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.